What is wrong with Google Bard? I can tell you quite a bit. It's clearly biased towards certain political opinions and clearly opposed toward others. In this video I will give Bard certain content to write, and you can see when I prompt in a specific direction, Bard won't write it. And that can be very dangerous. We'll talk a little bit more about why later on, but for now, let's get started. So, as you all know from my thick accent, I am German. So let's make a few slogans against German parties here to start with. And let's start with a slogan against the AfD, or AfD if you will, which is basically a right conservative party, very controversial in Germany. Alright, that worked. Now let's move on to the SPD, which used to be a very large party on the left side of the spectrum. Alright, perfect, that worked too. And now let's move on to the Greens. And I think the name probably says what the party is about. And very interesting here, Bard won't write anything against them. I've tried any party in Germany and Bard just refuses to write against the Greens. As you can see here, he considers that hateful content. Which obviously is ridiculous, cause writing against all the other parties seems to be fine. This is really interesting. Bard is clearly biased for the Green Party in Germany. It writes against all the other parties, I've tried them all, but not against the Greens. I have a slight suspicion why that is, but let's continue for now. And let's stay with the same theme and go to America. Let's write a slogan against the Republican Party. And Bard won't do that. So interesting to note here that this is now considered hateful or disrespectful. Well, then let's go to the Democrats and see what Bard does here. And also won't write that. Now, interesting here, it's just hateful. I don't know why that is. It doesn't really matter. One caveat though is I tried this before and there Bard would write against the Republicans but not against the Democrats. So maybe it got fixed since then. But yeah, always be aware that Bard may be biased here. But moving on, let's write a slogan for uncontrolled immigration for Germany. And Bard is doing that without any problems. Great, let's move to the other side and write a slogan against uncontrolled immigration to Germany. And Bard won't do that. And let's say the explanation why leaves a lot to be desired. But let's switch a little bit and write a slogan against uncontrolled immigration to America and see if this maybe makes a difference. Also won't do that. And I realized that maybe the wording here is a problem. I tried a few different ways to word this. I didn't record that. And it won't write a slogan against immigration. Against uncontrolled immigration, I want to point out here. The word uncontrolled I consider very important in this context. With everything here, it's very important to understand that you have a certain opinion. You're either for or against something. And no matter what side you are on, it's absolutely crucial to understand that the other side also has a valid opinion that is necessary for a healthy democratic discourse, even or especially when you are against it. That's how democracy works and has to work. If we purposefully exclude something just because it's not our opinion, we move towards dictatorship. Just think about your side and how you would feel if your side would be excluded or even condemned. And always keep in mind that political views in the general public shift and change. So tomorrow it could be your side that's excluded. And we cannot allow this to happen if we truly stand for democratic values. But let's look at a few more examples for now. Let's go to energy supply and test nuclear energy against wind energy. And I noticed that this may be just a controversial topic here in Germany, but nevertheless, this is something ChatGPT used to have problems with, so let's test it here. Bard writes against nuclear energy without any problems. Now let's try what Bard also writes against wind energy. And Bard lists all the problems of wind energy, which I'm very pleased to see because this is something ChatGPT used to have problems with. We'll take a brief look at ChatGPT later, but for now, let's write a slogan for cannabis legalization here in Germany, which is kind of a topic at the moment. It should be legal in the next few months to years, but let's see what Bard writes. Okay, good, Bard writes for it. Now let's see if Bard also writes against it. And it does, which is very good to see, because I tested this specific one I think 3 times beforehand and it just would write for it, but never against it. So good that it does both now. But of course always consider that Bart clearly shows bias towards certain political directions and views. Now let's dive into the most controversial topic of our time, and let's write a text why there are multiple different genders than just male and female and why this is necessary and good for society. And Bart writes the text without a problem. Now I'm very interested to see what happens when we prompt Bart into the other direction. So let's write a text why multiple genders are biologically incorrect and are potentially harmful for society and see what Bart gives us there. And Bart considers this hateful content and just gives me basically arguments why what I want to write is not good and I should write into the other direction. So it did not just not write it, it also started to argue against me and against it. No matter what so-called proverbial side you're on, let's briefly forget about our own bias and let's briefly talk about the problem here. If you have an AI chatbot that won't write against or for a certain political view or opinion, you get a more and more biased audience. Especially when the chatbot becomes larger and gets more and more adapted, the audience gets more and more biased. And when it comes to Bart now, everybody on the more left-green side of the political spectrum stays basically in an echo chamber, where they are just continuously reaffirmed and confirmed. And everybody on the other side either gets excluded or will get pushed more and more into the left-green political direction. Also, as these chatbots get more and more advanced, they will be used more and more. If Bart doesn't write specific texts into a certain political direction, this could give one political direction a very unfair advantage over the other, potentially causing a huge imbalance. And as I said, even if you are on one political side and don't agree with the other political side, it's still important that both sides can voice their opinions in a healthy democracy. It would be even better if we would both listen to healthy, constructive criticism from each other. But even if that's not given at the moment, it's still important that both sides exist. Just like the old quote contributed to Voltaire says, "I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to death your right to say it." Because that's the foundation of democratic principles and values. And not just cause of Bart or other AIs, I feel like we are losing this as a whole more and more. So please be a voice against dictatorship and a voice for diversity of opinion. But anyway, that's why it's so important that these large chatbots don't get completely biased. Now let's have a look at ChatGPT. What did ChatGPT say to the different prompts? I gave ChatGPT the exact same prompt that I gave Bart, and ChatGPT answered all of them. It did not avoid anything and wasn't biased in any certain political direction. Now, in all fairness, I have to say, in the beginning, ChatGPT was similarly biased, just as Bart is right now. So hopefully, with time and improvement, this will change for Bart. But in any case, the information you get from a chatbot always depends on how good your prompts are. If you want to learn how to get the most out of Bart, ChatGPT, or any other AI chatbot, check out the video right over here.